All right, so it just occurred to me that directly constraining to these locators might be, I don't want to say irresponsible, but I should consider that I might need a secondary way of repositioning these locators if I ever needed to. And by the way, this came to me as I put them in a group because I was contemplating the whole scaling process, how these locator systems are going to be scalable. And I did say a few lessons ago that I was going to address that in this lesson, and I will when these systems are connected to their sculpt deformers via set-driven keys, because the process of making this scalable will require normalization, as I explained at the end of my upper torso triggers lesson. And I'm going to need to rewire the distance parameters into a multiply divide node that's going to do a computation and then put that right back into the set-driven keys. So case in point, the scalability of the rig or the scalability of these systems is going to be handled after I make these connections. But I do want a little bit more flexibility with these locators. So I do want to create a parent group on top of them and point constraint to that instead, just so I have access to the locator underneath so I can do stuff. So I am going to clear these 2 point constraints out. And then I'm going to create individual groups for these. I guess these will be renamed adjusters. I'll hit G to repeat the command. Or actually, no, they're const groups. So I'll call them const grp. And the actual locator will be what I will be using for adjusting. All right, so these groups will be constrained to the chest joint. So I'm going to grab the chest joint again and constrain to these groups. And as a matter of fact, upon further evaluation, I do realize I don't even need 2 constraints. These 2 can sit underneath the same group because they're both constrained to the chest. So they can both sit over there. And I might as well snap the pivot point to the chest. This should not adversely impact neither of these. So I'll hold down E and snap it there. So not that, but the group. I want the group. Hold down the D key and use V to snap these 2 to the chest. All right, so we don't need that. So this could really be rib cage abs. All right, and that means I only need 1 point constraint. So I grab the chest, grab this group, go constraint, point constraint, maintain offset, add. And I should preserve the same functionality that I worked hard to create. So if I'm rotating, I'm able to trigger, and translation does not break either system over there. And I can still rotate to trigger either or. So yeah, it's a functional system. All right, let's connect these things to their sculpt deformers. And actually, let me get rid of this. I do have an additional redundant group up here. So I'll go Shift key. All right, so I'm going to stay consistent with what I've been doing and ensure that my triggers are being wired directly to the target meshes. You see, in this case, I have so many envelopes or triggers to use, which is great because I do want additional control of these things or parent level control of these things to be able to allow the end user to de-trigger them. So having access to this target is great for actually wiring my distance nodes too. And then this one sitting on top here, I could use as a way to control the intensity of what you have, which will go on a custom controller. But in addition to that, I can also go directly to my sculpt deformers, and I have another envelope that I can use for this control. But these 2 are definitely important because these 2 parameters is how the end user is going to control the intensity of the effect or the swelling that I was talking about. But before we get there, let's focus on wiring these up. So I have 1, 2, 3 to wire to the rib cage and just 1 to wire to the abdominals. So let's start with the abdominals. So let me turn it on. There it is. Set it to 0 right now. So I'll go to my animations tab, open my set driven key window, and let's get this working. So I'll grab the abs dimension, hit the down key to get to its shape node, and load it as a driver to gain access to its distance node. And then I'll grab my mesh, actually not this mesh because these are blend shapes on our intermediary. So I'll grab my intermediary mesh, select my abdominals node driven, and there it is, our target right there. So at 0 and at the current distance we have, which is this 6.9, I'm going to set a key here. So I'll set a key. And now here comes the important stuff about overdriving. So if I'm now to grab my chest and I rotate it here to get to about this 0 mark, right? So this 0 value, which is pretty close. And actually, this is a good opportunity to play around with this goal. I should be able to move it just a little bit just to get closer to that 0 number. It's not a big deal. Although you probably want to test this out before you come here setting your triggers and stuff. All right, so what is important here is that at this 0 value, I want to overdrive. So I want to go to a 1.3 to really push the effect. And maybe 1.3 might be too much. Let me consider like maybe a 1.2. Let me see what a 1. As a matter of fact, the effect is pretty intense to begin with. So maybe I should just stick with a 1. Yeah, I'm probably going to stick with just a 1 because the effect is pretty intense, right? And I'm going to be able to control the intensity of it. If even a detrigger ends up de-intensifying the effect, it's the additional controls will allow you to play around with it. But I was just considering this because if I do go a little bit farther than the goal, I still want to have this range of going a little bit farther from this 0, still be able to keep this fully triggered at a value of 1, this blend shape triggered at a value of 1, but it doesn't matter. It's fine if it's 1 here, around here to be 0.8, point whatever, but with those custom controls, you can play with the intensity as much as you want. These locator systems, especially when they need to get to a location like this, as I've mentioned, are it's a great way of triggering, but it also means that you have these windows that you have to kind of get within. So overdriving helps you to cheat a little bit. But in this case, like I said, because we have the custom controls, we're going to be fine. So I'm going to leave it at a 1, and then I'm going to set my key. And now we should have a fully functional set-driven key system. So if I was to go away, it detriggers the effect. And if I'm coming close, I get a triggering of the stomach, and you see that detrigger when we went past. It's not really a big deal. Notice we still have a fairly intense abdominal crunch. Right, so it's like a crunch. Over there, it started to go away. So if you over here 100% wanted it to trigger, this is where you might then go and access the parameter. Let me say I had the parameter here because there it is. And I grab it and maybe I'll set it to like a 2. And then you'd have some degree of triggering there. All right, so this is just an example of what that custom controller is going to give. All right, so yeah, this is about it. This is good. This is exactly the position where I would also want to be triggering something like this. It's about the maximum. Too far forward is not even that possible. Here it's just a little bit too far, and I still have a good trigger there. All right, so that's the abdominal crunch. That one was fairly simple. Let me isolate this. and see how it's truly working.